still wrestling with a new computer system. Doesn't seem to have a good plan. Actually, I got into some fairly interesting conversation with the UI computer upgrades, and don't get me wrong, they need it. They're running DOS. So it's a very old system. This STAR discussion upgrades was in 2019. We still don't have computer upgrades. Estimates in was 27 million, take 2 to 3 years is what we heard. Then they wanted to build it from the ground up, spend 47 million, which is more like $80 million, and take 3 to 5 years. That doesn't seem to be a good system. And again, I actually said, why don't we buy something off the shelf like other states do instead of building it from the ground up? And my reply I heard from them was, we're too big. So I did some research. Texas, GDP, $2.6 trillion. Kentucky, GDP, $1.95 billion. Texas population, 29.3 million people. Kentucky population, 4.05 million. They bought their computer system off the shelf, had it up and going in 2 years. Texas is much bigger than us, and I wonder, are we using the right approach to our computer upgrades? So that's what led me to passing Bill 395. I think we need to have a measured plan on computer upgrades. We need to be a watchdog of the taxpayer dollars, and it doesn't seem to be that's what we're doing. So that's what led me to pass this bill. Thank you very much, Chair Williams.
Thank you very much, Chairman Pratt. And to that end, in the members' packets, there's a timeline here of some of the timelines for Acts Chapter 142 or KRS 7A and 185 and 190. A lot of people when this came out, they looked at this committee and said, well, nothing's going to happen for 2 years, not this budget cycle, but the next budget cycle. And there are responsibilities in terms of appropriations in the next, but not this cycle, the next cycle. However, in there are also responsibilities that we have immediately. One of them is for legacy system projects, cybersecurity projects, the current and ongoing operations and maintenance of our agency information, and we're supposed to look into the what we call the governance and the funding of technology in the state and throughout the nation in terms of what innovations, how other states do things. So that's day one, and that's what this meeting is about, and why we'll talk about this as we go through. The committee looks at it. But I think we will also have, and I want the committee to discuss this, if we want to meet during session. I think there may be some specific bills we're going to want to hear that deal with cybersecurity or legacy systems this session in preparation for our next one. And so we'll talk about that and make the appropriate LRC request if we deem that necessary or that's what we want to do. But likely that's what we're going to want to do. But I very much appreciate all your agencies being here. This is not a gotcha sessions. We're really looking at governance. We're really looking to try to fund the things that need to be funded in technology that are sort of invisible. And as technology moves, as we shared from a project space to capital budget, it's so much more an operating budget issue, software as a service. We want to make sure that we're funding things properly and we're making the proper decisions in that. And that I know some of you agencies are struggling with this right now. So I'd like to invite COT up to the, because their COT in the bill is sort of our partner, and they get the report, they look at the report, we review it with them. And we have something here that I don't like long meetings, okay? Normally I like it to be half an hour, but we got way too much, an hour, and we'll go over. So we have a shot clock up here we're working on. And so we're going to start the shot clock. We're going to try to keep everybody at 10 or 15 minutes. Again, it's if we have a little, this is more like soccer. If there's a play, we can delay it. The game, who knows when a soccer match is going to end? You know, it's only the guys on the referee. Yes. Stoppage time. So, but it is a good guideline, and you don't have to take all your time. But I just wanted to get that up there so we can get through the meeting in a fair way and have the questions that we want to ask are everybody's seen those questions. Again, it's not a gotcha. So, Madam I don't know, CIO Day or
Ruth.
Commissioner Ruth.
Ruth
Okay.
would be good. Yes, good morning. And thank you. Again, my name is Ruth Day. I'm the Executive Director of the Commonwealth Office of Technology. With me today,
I'm David Carter. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer with the Commonwealth Office of Technology.
Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, sir.
And Jim Barnhart, Deputy CIO, Commonwealth.
You as well. Thank
and
you.
also with us, Carrie Welch, Executive Director, COT.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Good to see you all. Appreciate you all being here today.
And we thank you for this opportunity to share and kind of just in a casual way, as you've kind of suggested. Appreciate Representative Pratt's comments about our environment. I would say today that we operate a modern infrastructure. We do. Where we don't have modern infrastructure are in areas where the applications cannot be supported by more modern infrastructure. I think a large part of that modern infrastructure and how we got here, it was through the foresight someone had over 10 years ago to put together a consolidated organization. And I think that's really served the Commonwealth well. There are quite a bit of large legacy modernization programs going on right now. They're big programs. One of them's been mentioned, CAVIS, another that's in the planning of unemployment insurance. There is a huge integrated tax system. These are large projects, and no matter how much, really, almost how much money you throw at them, they take a long time. So we are actively engaged in legacy modernization. I'm going to ask Carrie Welch to come up a little bit. She's going to talk about what we do directly relative to legacy modernization, but otherwise, COT's role, again, is to have the infrastructure and to support the applications that run in the agency. So one of the questions was about how other states operate. And for the most part, I would say there are 4 priorities that pretty much all states agree in, and they are cybersecurity, cloud development, digitalization, and legacy modernization. In Kentucky, we're in lockstep with that. Those are our priorities as well. And David's going to speak to a little bit about cybersecurity. I'm going to ask Jim to talk a little bit about cloud and our strategies there. Otherwise, one thing I would like to take this opportunity is to say thank you for the increases that were given in the way of salary, because that's really important. I mean, the 8% and 6% were great. I think there's more room, particularly in IT professionals. There's work we need to do with job titles, and another key is remote work. It's very important in the IT world to recruit and retain folks to offer remote work. So these are some of the things we'll be focusing on, job titles, trying to create a path that gives people a chance to come into the Commonwealth and then grow within the Commonwealth. So workforce, of course, people are our biggest asset, so that's certainly a focus of ours as well. I think one of your questions was about budget. Of course, our whole budget is an IT budget. Our model is that we have rated services and assessments. Otherwise, we do make requests for capital projects. As Senator Williams said, that's kind of not the trend. That's not the market of today. Most of the things today are more from an operating perspective. That's kind of the macro of what I'd really like for you to understand, is that we really do have a modern infrastructure, and where we don't, I think David will speak to that a bit, is those areas where we need to modernize the applications.
And on the point of legacy applications, my history of working with our agencies, I've been with the Commonwealth Office of Technology for 17 years. I've had the privilege of being the CISO for 7 years. And working with our agencies, there's absolutely there's no lack of desire to modernize these applications. Our agencies deal with so many constraints. They deal with the size and scope of these systems, the criticality of what they do. Our citizens depend on these services. And moving older technology, recoding, retooling, readapting it to modern technology can cause interruptions, can cause challenges that the citizens can't receive the services that they need. So there's definitely not a lack of desire. It may be funding to support the purchase of a new off-the-shelf solution. It may be the staff needed to adapt new business processes to new technology or new solutions. And the agencies can speak to this much better than I can. But COT has in place the modern technology. We use the same technology that large cloud providers like AWS use. We use virtualization. We have distributed data centers. We have the technology to support modern technology needs. It's about getting everybody positioned for success to be able to utilize that technology to the advantage of the business units that they support. So there's definitely support needed there, and COT I think is ready to provide the technology support to help them get there.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Of David? So David, my experience is like the hardest working guy I've ever met. And maybe because of being in cybersecurity, maybe is perhaps the most worried guy because he carries a lot of weight on his shoulders. But in these legacy systems, when you're talking about that, I know there's several large legacy systems that all of us pay attention to. How many smaller legacy systems are sitting on servers that are out of maintenance? I mean, can you give us a relative balance in the Commonwealth, the ones that we don't see that are really out there that you worry about?
The majority of the risk are the elephant in the room, are those large flagship applications.
Okay.
Those are the ones that we have a relatively constrained number of legacy systems in the environment, and they're mostly those larger systems, the ones that are a heavier lift, that are more challenging to replace, more challenging to replicate. The smaller systems, we have those. They're usually very specialized. They're like equipment that is tied to very specialized testing equipment or very specialized business processes, but they're very small. They're a couple of computers, and we can build, additional security constraints around those. That's not as challenging as the big flagship systems. That's where the majority of our risks lie.
Thank you.
I think next on the list was maybe there was some question about cloud, and we thought we'd just share a little bit about.
Yeah, and our data center, both our primary data center and our alternate data center, I think it's positioned that it can move to the cloud, when the agencies, whether it becomes from an RFP or if they're going through, modernizing an application on their own, we are ready, to support that and able to move things to the cloud as needed. We're looked at storage and various things in the cloud. We're looking at DR in the cloud. We tried it a couple of years ago. It wasn't quite ready, but we will be able to explore that going forward. So I think with all the new equipment that we have, we're positioned well that we can move things as needed, and as the agencies, have the need, we can support them and help them with that.
Another question was governance and legacy, and I'm going to turn my chair over and ask Carrie Welch to come share a little bit.
So yeah, we wanted to talk about governance within COT a little bit. I'm the executive director of the Office of Architecture and Governance, so all this is kind of in our wheelhouse. So our biggest piece of governance is working with our IT leads through meetings every other month. We have the Kentucky Information Technology Standards, or what we call KITS. These are approved technologies for use on the Commonwealth network. We evaluate things from a financial point of view to see if there are current enterprise solutions that are currently in use by another agency that could leverage what another agency might have a use case for. We look at it at an operational standpoint where make sure everything's compatible with what we have in-house already, and of course from a security standpoint. We also have been receiving funds for the legacy modernization. We've received $20 million in bond funds, and we've been able to, typically these are systems that are would cost under $1 million to modernize. We've been very successful. We've helped the Department of Local Government with their special purpose government entities launching a brand new application. We've worked to modernize paper forms, things that were manual processes. We've modernized the CRIS system for the personnel cabinet with those funds. So it's been very successful, and we hope to continue to receive that funding because that's been a game changer for agencies that desperately need to modernize but don't have it built into their budget or their funding. COT also offers through our governance a pilot and POC program. What that does is when an agency wants to look at doing something new, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, they submit that to the pilot and POCs. That sends out an email to all of the IT leads and all the agencies. Hey, is there an interest where we can collaborate together? Then we do an approval through the CIO's office, and we monitor the status of the pilot and POCs. We have a review process for all technology purchases through the SPR1. We also review every RFP, RFI, and RFB that goes before it's published, and we also have either a technical advisor and or scores on every IT-related RFP that's released through the Commonwealth. We have all of our policies, procedures posted on our website. They are updated on a regular basis through our compliance office. We have a GIS clearinghouse that COT manages, and that just promotes better data sharing across all of the Commonwealth, not just state, but local entities as well. And we have an IVMV process as well, and change management that all of our agencies are involved in when we're doing a big change across the board. We have a change advisory board that vets those changes out, makes sure there's no conflicts, and communicates that with all the agency stakeholders.
Thank you very much. And I want to open up the committee. Anybody have any questions? Chairman Pratt.
All right. Again, forgive me because I don't know what you guys do. I'm sorry. So I've asked you a question. It's way out of the ballpark to say it's out of our wheelhouse. I understand, and again, that you still have mainframes that store records off-site, like in Utah or wherever. Is that correct?
That is correct. We do have mainframe as a service. It was purchased through IBM, but they spun off a sister corporation now called Kyndryl. We have about 70 mainframe applications on that. The primary data center is in Boulder, Colorado. We have an alternate data center for the mainframe in Raleigh, North Carolina. As far as the mainframe, it has been upgraded. We moved on what was called the Z12. We're now on a Z15. We've worked to update COBOL and all the IMS and DB2 components. So from a security perspective, from best practices, standards, all of the encryption is up to date. Our biggest challenge with the mainframe is finding skilled people who can continue to support that. We have contractors who have retired from the state and are on their second 30-year career with us.
Actually, I knew about that. I've talked to some of your contractors that retired and now are coming back because the only ones can work on it. Why not the cloud? Why are we doing the mainframe? Why are we doing mainframes? And why are we still doing that? Is it just, again, I don't know. So please educate me.
It's a very complex system, and a lot of the agencies have retention records that are huge. And doing that data migration into a new distributed cloud system is a huge undertaking. Doris, the IT project, a lot of the revenue systems are on the mainframe. A lot of the UI components are still on the mainframe. And then transportation and CHFS also have applications.
I've got a couple more if you don't mind, Chairman. All right. When departments do upgrades, you said you overlooked the RFP. Do you actually make recommendations as to how to upgrade them, or they decide on their own and then you oversee, make sure they do it correctly?
Actually, when we get an RFP to review the first time, we do look at that. Is there something that we currently have in-house that could solve this solution? If not, we do make recommendations before the RFP is published. And usually when a agency is looking, they're looking for a vendor to come in and do everything, and then leave it up to the agency to provide that ongoing support and maintenance of that application once it's stood up.
Speaking of agency, one thing I have heard from agencies is our computer will not talk to their computer, so therefore we cannot share or access their information. Why? And you may not be able to answer
If you
that.
could give me some use cases, I'd be glad to track that down.
Okay.
We have, we have firewalls open between our data center and the cloud, the mainframe. We have a robust FTP server that we do. I couldn't tell you how many terabytes of data transfers that we do on a daily basis to talk with other states, with other entities outside of the state. So if you have some use cases, I'd be glad to track that down.
I'll be getting back to you. Thank you,
Okay?
ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative All, I believe, has questions as well.
Yeah, I might be the only person up here who's actually been to a KITS and CAB meeting in my former career here as a state employee. So thank you for your comments there. I want to make sure we delineate what we're talking about here as a committee. Most of the questions, Chairman Pratt, that you're speaking to is in the application or software space. Can you talk to us from a hardware space on your rollout plans? I know that all the agencies are on a different rollout schedule where they get new computer equipment every 3, 4, or 5 years, depending on their budgets and things of that nature. So what is the generic refresh cycle out there for COT and some of your agencies for these partners to get new actual hardware equipment?
So we are on the refresh schedule, and it is, like you said, between 4 and 5 years. Most of the stuff that I'm going to say the everyday user, they can get by. Now, if there's a special need that we need to look at and upgrade prior to that, we will do that. But that is our schedule. And again, if there is something that, they need a developer or some other type of need, we will refresh that ahead of that time frame.
But I just want to so most state employees, users with whatever kind of desktop, laptop, whatever machine they have, they're probably getting a new machine every 4 to 5 years on the regular. So there's not somebody out here. I know that. I just wanted to be on record. There's not somebody out here with a 15-year-old out-of-date laptop walking around out there, and we monitor that. I know you have
that guy
systems.
down there wouldn't let us do it.
Right. Yes, and it'd be out of support and all that other stuff. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I do want to say, so in the bill, COT really, like with the rest of the state, is our partner in this endeavor. And so the questions, great questions, great response, and I think we'll all be working together. The other thing I neglected to mention is that the other partners that we have in this is our committee staff. And we have Jennifer Hayes, who's our committee staff administrator, and she's been a great help. Sarah Watts has been an analyst who's attended a number of these meetings.
She's over at the rack.
There's Sarah over there. I was looking, where's Sarah? Okay. And we have Adam Johnson, who is new. Adam, just new with LRC, and I think they determined that this was a big project. We may need some additional help. And then Jennifer Smith is our committee assistant here. She takes on the hard cases like chairs like me. Okay, and so that's why she's here. But it's a team. I'm thinking we're looking forward to working together to get us into the next generation with the Commonwealth. So thank you very much. And I would like to call up now the Secretary of State. And it's interesting that, County Clerks Association. Sorry about that for that. And this is an interesting follow-on because the County Clerks Association actually, and as we're looking at some of these other agencies, does not fit within our purview of county clerks. However, the county clerks probably interface with more various agencies, as I quickly learned, than just about any other organization in state government. So if you all would introduce yourself, come to the floor, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having us, Chairman. My name is Tabitha Clemens. I'm the county clerk from Grant County and the incoming president for the Kentucky County Clerks Association.
I'm Trey Grayson with Frost Brown Todd, work with the County Clerks Association.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you for having us. So we thought we would give you a brief rundown of our involvement with state agencies and how we use them from a technology perspective. And we're happy to answer any questions that you might have. So we'll start with the Secretary of State's office. We certify the candidates and amendments for the ballots with the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State certifies to the clerks the candidates that file with the Secretary of State's office and any constitutional amendments. Those now are available to us through their portal online, through the county clerk's portal with the Secretary of State. It used to be a mail document that they mailed. Sometimes that document would be very thick, depending on the election year. So we're welcome to that change. We like that change. But we do think that there could be some improvement when we get to the certification of the election. They've made a huge improvement for us on the way that we submit the certification of an election. But we would like to see some unification with the State Board of Elections election night reporting, and that certification that we complete after the election is over. Again, that certification used to be paper and pen. You did not have an electronic way to fill out that form. Now we have an electronic version that we can submit through the Secretary's portal, but seeing some some unification there could be helpful to the clerks. When it comes to notaries, if you have filled out a notary application online with the Secretary of State's office, you know that is an improvement over the last few years. However, we still think that the online portal could allow our applicants to submit the application and pay the fee online instead of mailing that in. The clerk, we then retrieve the notary certificates online, which again, a huge improvement. We had to log those in through our mail systems. When they were mailed into us, it took longer to get them. So as the staff members in the Secretary of State's office are certifying those to us, we now can see them in real time, which makes the process a lot better for those who are applying. They come into our office, notaries then come into our office. We print the certificate, record their oath, certificate, and bond together in our record books. Additionally, where the Kentucky Registry of Election Finance comes into this with candidates who file, is we continue to see that there's issues with the KREF system. Currently in my county, I have an unexpired term for a jailer. We've been working for months to try to get that corrected where he can file electronically. And candidates report those issues not only to the secretary, to you all, they also report them to their county clerks, especially those who file with us, which is all city councils, school boards, all county-wide offices. They're all coming in our office upset about their filing with KREF. Moving on to the State Board of Elections. Election night reporting, we already talked to you briefly about the unification that we would like to see between the certification of election results with the SOS. Something that makes that a little more seamless would be nice. Additionally, the voter registration system is something that we use on a daily basis in our office. So those voter registration cards used to be primarily paper. They came into our office. You went out and had a voter drive at a school or at a community event. You brought back paper cards. That's not the case anymore. I don't even take paper cards when I go have a voter registration drive. I use everything. If I'm going to an older community event, I might take a few, but for our high schools, I put a QR code up on a big screen on posters. They have posters in our high schools with the QR code for our students to be able to register to vote once they turn 18 using that QR code. So it's just an easier way to have them register. That information comes into us electronically into each county clerk's office, and then we properly register them with their precinct, their school board district code, whether they get a city code or not. That's all a manual process of us checking those to make sure that it's correct. A GIS system, and we'll talk about that in a couple other areas too, would really be a helpful tool for us to have a statewide GIS system where we can ping these individual addresses to code people. Right now we use street tables, so some counties use those, some counties have other ways of doing it, but in our county, in Grant County, we have street tables. We update those street tables every time there's a change within PVA, so if a house is added to an end of a street, a new subdivision is put in, we have to update those street tables continuously to make sure that it meets the requirements that we have in our county to code voters correctly. In the realm of electronic poll books, we are very appreciative to the legislator and the work that was accomplished to allow counties to adopt their own electronic poll book vendor for elections. Currently, we download the data for the electronic poll books. We could certainly see some updates with open records requests to the counties relating to the rosters. Once you have come in to vote, we have open records requests for those rosters. We'd like to see that be handled by the State Board of Elections. Currently, if you request voter data as a candidate or for commercial purposes, you're requesting that through the State Board of Elections. We would like these all of this data to be held with them as well once a voter has voted. We have some list maintenance ideas. Obviously, list maintenance is a very important component of voter registration to keep our list up to date, to make sure that people who are no longer eligible to be on our voter rolls get removed timely. We would like to be able to enter some data to potentially make moves or updates for the State Board of Election to review prior to removing people. Currently, the process is we wait for the State Board to indicate to us that someone could be removed. So we would like some electronic means to be able to do that. Currently, if I know that my office, what we've done since I became clerk is on a monthly basis, we fill out a form and we send that into the State Board of Elections to remove any deceased voters from our county. In a small county like mine, checking the obituaries, there's just a few funeral homes. It's not hard to do. In a larger county, I'm sure that would be a huge undertaking. But it would be nice if we could submit that information electronically through the voter registration system instead of having to fill out a form and send that in. Moving on to Kentucky Transportation Cabinet and motor vehicle. So many of our voter registration addresses come from the motor voter concerns that we have and the errors that happen when folks go to the regional offices. We certainly have seen some inconsistency on who receives information about registering to vote. So we have, constituents who come back and report to us, whether that's within our own families or within our staffs or just individuals that we know in our communities. But some are asked, some are not asked. We've certainly tried to address these concerns with KYTC about what we're seeing on our side when folks come in. Some clerks even have examples where constituents show up in their offices requesting to be removed because they know that they're not legally eligible to be registered, but for some reason they have been registered, then receive a card from us that states this is your precinct. Then they bring that in and they're concerned about that process and want to make sure to get those removed. When it comes to precinct boundaries, a statewide GIS mapping system would greatly improve the accuracy for us when we're talking about how to implement our voter registration information into each individual voter. That's a huge undertaking when you look at the population we have in Kentucky of registered voters, and making sure that that's 100% accurate is always the clerk's main priority. Then on to poll workers with elections and motor voter concerns. So all of our poll workers must provide, their names to us. Some of us have forms that they fill out on our individual websites. And then the State Board of Elections and Secretary of State's office has certainly worked hard to try to recruit officers as well. But that's all through manual processes where they email us lists. It would be nice if we had all of these people in VRS. They were coded as poll workers where we could pull lists from there instead of having to keep up with these lists manually in our offices. And being able to assign them into positions on where they work would be a handy tool as well. Okay, then from the transportation's perspective, the Transportation Cabinet's perspective on motor vehicle transactions that we do with them, the clerks use Avis currently. Avis is a Cobalt mainframe system that was developed in the last century. And then we also use Cavis, the new system, and we're going to talk about both of those with you. So currently, the mainframe system that we've seen a lot of delays recently. If you've been into a county clerk's office recently, many of us have signs on our door that explain that there's a delay in our procedures because of the mainframe system. It's slow to react. We oftentimes see X weight on the bottom of our screen when we're transferring vehicles, so it takes a while to get those transactions to actually process. I know I was on the front line last week when I had a deputy out for vacation, and it took me almost 2 hours to get one title to push through. It was a complicated title. It had some issues, but we spent a good while just trying to get the system to take the information. And we see these updates. They spoke earlier about Colorado. A lot of times our downtime starts around 10 a.m. when they're getting in the office at 8 and they're doing some updates. We've been back and forth with this for several months now, that it is unstable and we don't know when it's going to go down or when it's going to be working effectively. And then even when we are working, it's difficult to do things like updating addresses. It doesn't have a mailing address. So if you have a P.O. box, we have folks who, so we're really hopeful about Cavis and what Cavis brings to the table, because we're going to be able to address some of those concerns. And then we also see the improvements with Cavis, that the reminder cards that get sent to all of the auto owners in our Commonwealth, we pay for the cost of the paper and the postage, but there is a huge amount of those that are returned. We recently had our postmaster brought in a whole tray of them to us because they don't update addresses in the system. It's not linked with your driver's license address. It's not linked with any other communication within the state, voter registration. Those are not linked together. So right now in Avis, if you come into our office and let's say you own 5 vehicles, okay, or 4 vehicles and a boat, we have to update each one of them individually. Cavis looks to change that because it's a customer-based model, not a vehicle-based model. So we're anxious about those updates. But with Cavis, we're excited. It's web-based. It's hopefully modern. It has been built in-house. There's been numerous times that Cavis has been attempted. I'm sure Heather can get into how many. I don't know how many because it started before my time as clerk. It's been decades, though, that it's been trying to be updated.
It started before I was Secretary of State.
So the opportunities that we have with Cavis, are really exciting to many clerks. But we, as the implementation date grows closer, which is supposed to be the end of this year, the clerks, we certainly see that there's a significant undertaking with the training that has to be rolled out to our deputies. And Cavis has been providing training, but we have a lot of ground to cover in order for it to be operational by the end of the year. So we certainly have a long way to go in order to get all of our staffs trained and up to speed on being able to handle all of the transactions that come across the county clerk's counter on the motor vehicle side. Okay. So just have a minute left, and I want to talk briefly to you about the funding source for transportation in the county clerk's office. So the first $3 of every registration are allocated to certain funds. The first dollar pays for Avis and Cavis to be able to roll out the new product and to keep the current one up and going. The second dollar pays for IT in the clerk's office. So for us to be able to have computers, printers, all of those things, it comes from a second dollar. And we have a committee that oversees those funds. And then the third dollar is pulled for our small counties who have under 20,000 residents, for them to be able to stay operational to wait on motor vehicle customers. We also have an interactive with Kentucky Interactive with Tyler Technologies, the web-based application that allows you to renew your vehicles online. We love that service. Our constituents love that service, but we would love for that service to be expanded to also include not only cars, but boats, other vehicles, trailers, campers, but they also cannot update their address. So if you have an address issue when you go in to renew that, you have to call the county clerk's office in order to get that corrected prior to renewing your vehicle. So we would like to see some implementation there. And you also cannot pay tax, like a tax only payment. If you trade a car in and you have tax only that you need to pay on a vehicle that you traded, you can't pay just that. You only can renew vehicles online. So we'd like to see some improvement there. And there's several other agencies that we deal with, Department of Revenue, obviously the Commonwealth Office of Technology with all of our passwords and the help desk that we use through them, and our computers and software and hardware through them. And then KDLA, Vital Statistics, the PVA office, and then the numerous vendors that we have that we use within our offices, whether that's on land records, in our office or our accounting systems, but we have certainly many partnerships in the county clerk's office.
Thank you. And I believe Representative Ball, you have a question?
Yeah, I've got lots, but I'm going to focus on one. I want to talk about unification. I want to talk about KREF, a whole bunch of other things. But the downtime piece is what bothers me the most out of everything you talked about. Are those changes that are happening to the mainframe when you walk in at 8 o'clock and they're on Colorado time and you're going down, are those not going through the CAB process and being requested? Because most of those changes that could affect downtime should be approved through CAB and should only happen outside regular work hours.
I can't answer that question.
Well,
for
who
you.
could answer that question? What is going on with that?
COT, if you'd like to come back up. There's an open mic. Thank you.
So a lot of the issues that we've seen in the mornings is just a system overload. You know,
So it's not a change.
It is not
to
a
the
change.
system.
It is a system overload,
And it's just everybody logging on.
It is processing different data sets, like DOR would have an end of the month kind of cycle that they would have to process. Same thing with transportation or UI. There's different batch processes. So what we have done is we have reconfigured the system to give county clerks the priority. When they queue something up, that gets the first priority. If there's batch processes that can wait, they get second or third priority. And then our developers get last priority. If they're trying to do something,
But a development would be a change.
it would be, right.
So is that not going through CAB?
is.
Is
It
it
is.
happening after hours?
It is, but the way that the mainframe is currently architected, there is not a clear test and production boundary, and we are working
Okay,
to
we don't
separate
have
that.
we don't have
Yes.
a mirror test environment.
Right. We do and we don't. It's a little complicated. I have
Yeah.
to pull out an architecture diagram to show, but we are making improvements, and I apologize for the 2-hour wait. It's terrible. So.
Okay. All right. I got a lot. I'm going to let go. Okay.
Thank you. Actually, you mentioned KREF. I got a couple comments. Any of us that have a treasurer and hasn't fussed about KREF, good luck. You've got a good one. But, I actually was listening to one of the committee members when actually KREF in the computer upgrades weren't happy with the computer vendor. So that's a problem that I don't see going away anytime soon. So, it's a mess. One comment you did make is when you register for your driver's license, are you supposed to be asked to register to vote at that point in time?
That's a federal law. It's motor voter.
I got news for you. I renewed mine not too long ago, and no one asked me anything. So, interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Chambers Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I, too, am interested in learning more about the unification piece, but perhaps outside of this, because I know we're a little pressed for time. I was curious in what you said about a state-wide GIS system, in part because it seems like that has a lot of implications. Am I to understand that there is no sort of statewide, mapping data system that people in government can utilize to sort of show where everything is and tag people and tag locations? And I'm new to technology. I am learning a lot during this committee meeting. I have a whole list of things I need to look up after. But when you say you use street tables, does that mean you have a list of addresses and they're not on a usable map somewhere?
So the street tables that we have, we can save within the voter registration system. And when an address comes in, if it matches 100%, then it would flag them to be in that precinct, city, school district. But if it doesn't, then it doesn't match the street tables. You have to look that up manually, whether you have street tables or for Grant County, we utilize the PBA codes. So we have our taxing district codes that are actually, we've manually went in and updated every voter to have a taxing district code. Because our school boundaries, I have an independent school district, so our school boundaries and the city boundaries for that school don't match. So we have to individually know all of those homes. But the county clerks do not have a statewide system that is owned by, the Commonwealth that we can tap into, that voter registration then taps into for us to ping these houses. That's correct.
Well, I know I use GIS in my capacity as a professor, and I know that it's really robust in terms of tracking data and letting you look at trends and just like spits out as much as you put into it. And so I'm very interested in learning more about that, in part because it seems like in addition to making your all's jobs easier, which is always a goal of ours, it could help us better understand trends and just important information about the Commonwealth as a whole. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Representative Hutchins.
Yes, it occurs to me we've used the human signature for 100 years or more as a security measure. And it sounds like you're now doing voter registration online, but we talk about validating a signature on absentee ballots by looking at that signature. And I know if I try to sign online with my finger, any chimpanzee could have done just as well, I think. So how are we making sure we capture a high fidelity human signature when we register people online? And that is used, I believe, still in a number of places as a validation, right?
So certainly there's many of our counties who have went back and back scanned into the voter registration system every card, every change, any absentee voting request that's put in that was signed. And now with the digital signatures, even on the electronic poll books, when people sign in, you're correct, it doesn't look exactly the same, but there's certainly markers. And then we do have a signature verification process. So if we don't think that the signature matches, we pull it up in VRS as we get absentee ballots in, and we don't see that it matches, we can certainly, look to other documents within the voter registration system that we've scanned, or we can go to the paper files and pull some files and see.
Is it a finger signature or a stylus signature?
Either way. So we have stylus available. All of the electronic poll books, no matter which vendor they came from, had to meet the requirements to have some stylus. We also, counties can purchase their own stylus as well. They can use the stylus, the voter can use the stylus, or they can use their finger. We're not mandating that they use a stylus.
And I can answer your question. You also asked about, I think, more broadly nationally.
Yes.
So a lot of states still use the traditional signature verification. There's some states that, especially the states that have more vote by mail, where you have to do more signature verification. There's software that can match signatures and tries to address for some of these things. A few states, and I would say growing in the sense of more states are moving in this direction. It's too small of a number of shift to call it a big trend, are moving to writing in an identification number. So a driver's license number or some sort of state identification number. I believe Minnesota and Georgia do that. One of the challenges is to make sure that the correct number, that the voter knows what number is in the system, because if they don't write in the right number, they might write in the correct number, but if it's not in the system, it's not a match. But some states are moving to that. I think for some of the problems that you're identifying is the digitization of how we keep track of signatures makes them a little bit more eligible. My kids' signatures are terrible, and that's becoming. And then also older folks lose some dexterity, and signatures change over time. So some states have tried out these numbers, but that matching can create, especially in the transition part, can create a problem. But that's something that a few states have tried. Minnesota and Georgia are two that I know of.
Thank you. So in our conversation, I think historically, so this is a question for you, is that the clerk, both the circuit clerks and the county clerks, they wanted to see people in person. That was their touch with the public, and they wanted to do things with paper. The sense I'm getting with the new generation of clerks is they would prefer to do things electronically and would want to accommodate online for their constituents or common services. Is that a fair representation that you would like to see electronic interchange and online communication with your users instead of in the office?
Well, I certainly think that our constituents are demanding it, right? So so that drives a lot of it. But I think that you can look back at the last few years of legislation that the county clerks have been pushing and advocating for. You know, we were primarily an original document. You had to bring an original document to our land office in order to get it recorded. We now accept electronic recordings. We work towards that legislation with numerous partners at the table. There's a coalition of us to try to find common ground and to move forward to embrace technology into our offices. And I certainly think that, you know, while there's always a few folks who want to stay set in their ways, right? Sometimes that can be me. But we have to embrace technology. We have to try to move forward, and we have to try to provide the best services that we can for the Commonwealth.
Thank you very much for your time. Obviously, there's a lot more to be heard. I would like to say one thing about the GIS, and this is for the PVAs who aren't at the table, and why I think we need to hear things in the committee is the Transportation Cabinet, the agencies of state government that require parcel data to do their job, like to do inspections, to do purchases of roads, they have to buy that data from the PVAs. And the problem is they don't have one source to buy it. They have to go to 120 different counties and use their purchasing techniques. And the transportation, every time we build a road, they pay that data because the cabinet is buying it. The contractors that are responding to the bid are buying it, and when they actually do it, so like at least 3 times that gets purchased. And then when we go out and inspect it, we have to buy it. So that's the kind of issues that we're dealing with. This isn't the clerk's purview, but I would certainly hope that we have a bill that would make that available to agencies and the public on GIS. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, and with the discussion of transportation, I think they're next up, Heather. Maybe she can provide us some answers on some of the things that went here, but I appreciate you being here. If you introduce yourself for the mic.
I'm Heather Stout. Can you guys hear me? Is that on? Okay. Heather Stout, Executive Director of IT for Transportation Cabinet. We support a lot of all the IT applications for Department of Highways, vehicle regulation, including motor vehicle licensing, driver's licensing, motor carriers, and then, of course, all the other support agencies within Transportation Cabinet. There's a lot of things that have been said today that I would love to unpack. But I want to do a couple of highlights, and then I'll get into the questions that you've asked, if that's okay. On motor voter, Representative Pratt, I'm sure you are probably already registered to vote, which is why you were not asked the question. Okay. So the system is an intelligent system that was designed to minimize asking that question if it was unnecessary to be asked. We don't ask it for people under 18. We don't ask it, if they're just getting their driver's license. We don't ask it for those who are already registered, for non-U.S. citizens, things like that. So that was done based on requirements from the State Board of Elections. So some of the issues that Tabitha was speaking to, I think we need to see some of those examples, as many as we can, so we can identify where those issues may be that's resulting in them having some problems, so we can address those. GIS. I will say Kentucky has one of the most robust GIS systems in the nation. I've won many awards for the work that COT and KYTC and other agencies have done to build that GIS system, but there's flaws, parcel data being one of those. There was some legislation passed last or 2 sessions ago, maybe. Somebody else may know the answer to that. To collect all that parcel data, to get it into a centralized system so that transportation and other agencies that need it for Commonwealth jobs would have access to that. There's still room for improvement beyond that, getting tax district data within that so that we can automatically district vehicles, for instance, or automatically enable the voting system to precinct people. So there's other data that could be added to it to make it even more valuable. But I do think it's moving in the right direction. So that's some positive news. The Avis mainframe, we desperately want to get off of, right, Tabitha? Yeah. And There have been a lot of downtime issues in the past few months, really, but it has greatly decreased. The work that COT has done has helped. It doesn't make it better when you're standing in front of a customer and you can't process something. But last week we had about a 20-minute outage, and they quickly resolved it. But in probably 2 months ago, they were having those outages every single day. So it's improved. It still needs work. Ideally, we're getting off of it in a few months. CAVIS is coming, and we will be decommissioning the AVIS system. Thank goodness. Fourth attempt. The first 3 attempts were with vendor solutions. This one is being built in-house as those first 3 attempts failed. Would you like me to get into the questions that you asked, or do you have anything specific?
With the clerks being up here too, would the cabinet support using the CAVIS system to move to electronic tiles instead of the current paper tiles?
Absolutely. There is a great project going on right now. The pilot will begin early next year for electronic liens and titling, and it was something that was passed in legislation last year. We're working with Champ Titles and Tyler Technologies to implement that right now. Upon initial implementation, it won't be integrated with CAVIS because we got other things going on with CAVIS right now, and but then that will be integrated. So we'll start with a pilot at the beginning of the year, and dealerships, financial institutions will be able to become approved entities to electronically file their liens, release liens, and apply for application for title all electronically, so they don't have to come into the office and bring paper. I think that can grow into e-titles, meaning no paper titles. But that's not something that's in the bill right now. But I do think as we get this system fully implemented, then we'll be able to have that conversation and be able to possibly implement something like that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sure.
So on the implementation of CAVIS, do we have a hard date on when that's going to happen yet?
Beginning of January. So there'll be a date set with the county clerks on when that occurs, January 2nd, January 3rd, whatever is determined. That gives the team a good period, a window for data migration from AVIS to CAVIS. And it also gives clerks a clean reporting mechanism for 2024.
Right. And segueing into the technology budget. So once CAVIS becomes active, it goes from being a project to probably immediately being a legacy system, in your operating budget. So you have an operating budget that you operate with as well as a capital budget that you deal with. And
so Transportation Cabinet does have their own IT budget, meaning we don't have to go to our business areas and request funding for particular projects. We're able to utilize our budget. If we have savings in one area, we can apply it to something in another area if we need to modernize in another area, which is very helpful. We can make our own rate change decisions on contractors and things like that without having to go to a business area for that request. I think the benefit is mostly because we're able to talk with our business areas about what do they need from a value perspective and what can we do to help them, rather than trying to figure out, well, how are we going to pay for everything? Because we do have our own budget within KYTC for IT.
And how does that interface with COT in terms of, is CAVIS being hosted at COT? You're doing it in the cloud?
Yep.
Do you have other applications that you do with COT in the cloud? How's that budget interaction?
We have a mixture of items hosted in the cloud or at COT. Those are the two primary. We have some vendor hosted as well in the cloud, like in AWS or something like that. CAVIS is hosted on premise at COT. Of course, we have Avis mainframe applications. Driver's licensing are hosted in Boulder, Colorado. We have some of our highway systems are hosted on AWS. We have our intelligent transportation system that monitors all of our data from roadway sensors and other data sources in Google Cloud. Our customer service center that supports motor vehicle or vehicle regulation is AWS Connect. So really our cloud strategy at KYTC is more of a cloud smart strategy. What makes sense, right? So whenever something comes up that we need to modernize, we're looking at it from the perspective of should it be part of our normal .NET stack here within KYTC and it's hosted at COT, or are we going to a vendor solution that maybe needs to be hosted in the cloud, and what makes sense, and is it cost effective?
How are those costs relative to one of the? I mean, is that factor into your decision?
Absolutely.
Or is there a big difference?
Yeah. We've not seen a drastic difference. Storage costs are less expensive in the cloud than at COT, and we have made some migration to that, but it really depends on what kind of performance you're looking for and things like that as well. So if storage costs are somewhat cheaper in the cloud, but now hosting an application in the cloud is not necessarily cheaper. And then you take it from, rated service to an ongoing operational subscription-based cost. So you have to know that that's budgeted into your account every year versus doing an upfront expenditure where then your costs are lower. So the licensing model of everything is changing. And that's something that we have to adjust within our budget to make sure that we're accommodating that.
Right. Okay. And what about backups? I mean, do you use COT, not COT? How do those work?
All of our data and applications are backed up at COT. Yeah. I mean, there are a handful that are hosted that have a different process. But the majority of our applications are hosted at COT, and they back up all of our data. We do verifications that data is backed up. We don't have any really scheduled backup and recovery test cycles, but it has been tested because there's been issues where we've had to recover systems, and that tests the process. So I'm sure they test it more regularly with other agencies potentially than ours, hopefully. But so that works well. Those systems are being backed up. We are doing a project at KYTC, starting a workshop in October to identify what are our truly mission critical systems, and is that backup and recovery time that we have now truly adequate for those mission critical systems, so that we can work with COT to identify possibly a cloud-based DR as a service, and make sure that those applications are able to be failed over more quickly. So for instances where we have natural disasters, if our IT systems are impacted by those natural disasters, we're some of the first people in transportation that have to go out and clear the roads, and we need systems to be able to do that. So those systems become our mission critical systems.
Good. And anybody else? I have another question. I don't want to hog the. Okay, Representative All.
I know historically when we were at CHFS, our alternative data center was actually in Northern Kentucky, Cincinnati area, where the things that we're hosting there at COT on-prem, where is your DR, stored? Where's your backup hosting center now, Jim?
Same place.
The same place. Okay. All right. And that would be where that's for the entire Commonwealth, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. But we don't utilize the alternate data center as a duplication of some of our on-prem. We don't use it as a failover site. So that's why we're right. It's for backup, recoveries, things like that, but it's not a immediate failover for us. That's not something that we chose to duplicate in cost. So that's why we're looking at these other DR possibilities.
And is that what you're considering is the ones that are mission critical
Yes.
to become a hot site?
Yes.
Okay.
Either alternate data center or DR as a service with a cloud provider.
Thank you. I think that's what will be involved. And so a little bit, slight pivot, remote work that came up during the session. There's some studies on that. And I thank you for saving the Commonwealth a lot of money, and that when finance moved out of this department, they did not have to find additional funds. But could you explain, for the committee and people, how remote work has helped you in that process, and is it essential to your ongoing operations?
It's definitely essential. So what Senator Williams is referring to is when Finance Cabinet moved to KYTC, we removed KYTC resources from an entire floor of transportation and dispersed them throughout the cabinet. And that was going to be very challenging and difficult because it's not just people, there's also supplies and paper and lots of things, equipment that has to be moved with them. At that time, there was an opportunity for OIT to step up and go, hey, we can move 110 people out right now and go back home where we were and free up this entire half a floor for this move. And we had proven very successful in doing that during the pandemic and have a lot of processes and procedures in place to manage people and projects and make sure that work is progressing and being productive. So we proposed that we go full remote in OIT, and that's what we've done. And that's still occurring today. We do have a small space in KYTC where we have what we call hoteling cubicles, where we have set up with monitors and docking stations and a reservation system for staff to come in when they need to dock and be able to do their work or go to meetings. And then we have a small operations area and my office and a few others that we've retained in KYTC. We've been able to hire people from a broader region. We've been able to retain people that we wouldn't have retained. And, you know, the productivity that we see from these resources, I think it's hard to measure productivity sometimes. But we have been able to see that when we were in the office and we were planning our projects, we would allocate 6.5 to 7 hours a day for a person on a project. Now we're doing the full 7.5 to 8 hours of allocation because there's not all this in between chitter chatter that happens in the office environment. And they're truly able to dedicate that time to a project. So we've definitely seen a growth of a few hours per day of our resources on project work. So that's been very valuable. Also, I mean, just general improvement of work-life balance for people and their enjoyment of their job. So we've had very low turnover, and I contribute that to remote work in a lot of cases.
Thank you. Representative Hutchins.
Yes, question with regards to the remote work. Do you buy any equipment for your remote employees, like computers, desks, chairs? And if so, how do you keep
There's an
track of those
option.
things? Okay.
So I'm going to forget what it's called, but there's a virtualization mechanism. That's probably not the right word. Where if they already have their own equipment, we can do VPNs and virtual desktops and things like that. So they don't necessarily have to, we don't necessarily have to ship them equipment, but in most cases we do purchase hardware and ship to those resources, and they set it up and use it. And then whenever they leave, if they do leave, their vendor, because a lot of times these are contract resources, will ship that back to us.
What about just office supplies, desk, chair?
Nope, that's all their responsibility.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I will say KYTC, we have about 125 resources. Almost 100 of those are contract resources for OIT.
Thank you very much. I think that was very enlightening.
All right.
Appreciate it. So next up, and it looks like we may be an hour and a half here, is the Secretary of State's office. Jennifer Rodney.
Hello, thank you all for having us here.
You would introduce yourself for the record.
Yes, I'm Jennifer Sketchfield, Assistant Secretary of State. I have with me Rodney Barnes, who is our system architect. Again, thank you for letting us come and speak with you and talk about the technology elephant in the room that I think everybody kind of deals with. Obviously, we came into office about 3.5 years ago, and we took a look initially at what was going on with our IT. Obviously, Secretary of State's office, you don't think of it as being IT specific, but almost everything we do in the office is done and created in a platform that was created in the Secretary of State's office. We call it the Integrated Desktop Enterprise. And what it does, it works with our notaries, which works with our county clerks. We have elections, which we've built since we've been in the office, which is the online portal, because previously it was, as Ms. Clemens said, handwritten in most cases, where we had to review these certifications for elections. And just like anybody here that wasn't a math major, sometimes addition didn't do well. Guess what? Computers do a lot better job computing those numbers. So it was a much more efficient process. And obviously our business services, we do business filings, we do UCC, we do certifications of business records, annual reports. All of these things are built into IDE. We did look initially about trying to take a look at solutions that might be off the shelf. We decided that because we have so many different things that work together, I mean, our land office as well is built inside of the IDE. It would have been such a large lift because we would have had to buy separate things for everything. So we did start an initiative to upgrade what we have in-house. And we're really proud of what we've done in the business office. More things are available online, able to offer that to the public, the constituents. And I do want to mention one thing that you all probably know, but I want to remind you of. We do this without taxpayer funds. The Secretary of State's office receives no general funds. So going into the last fiscal budget, we did ask you all to increase amount in our funds to do some of these upgrades that we are continually doing this year. We do get our money from our restricted funds, which is from our LLC accounts. No taxpayer funds to run the Secretary of State's office. And we're really proud of that. And we do appreciate the additional funds that you all have set forth so that we can make these IT upgrades that obviously affect your and our constituents. Some of the things that we've done is we have been slowly converting over to AWS cloud storage. Initially, there was a little bit larger of a cost involved with that, but over time, the decrease we will see, and it will be evident in the cost to our office. Our office, as I said, we do so many things, but we also interact with so many other agencies. Through, obviously, the county clerks, through notaries and for elections. We do have connections with COT. KI, that's something that we haven't mentioned, but because we accept so many payments online, we go through KI. A lot of the times, I won't say it's not necessarily programming on our part. When our system goes down, it is some type of a disruption either between us and COT, us and KI, and we also interact with Kentucky One Stop. Kentucky One Stop is not part of the Secretary of State's office, although we do pretty much the same things for the Commonwealth. Yeah, right. Department of Revenue, we work with them on reinstatement for companies. They will ensure that they have paid their taxes, they have paid their they have their unemployment insurance done. We work with the court AOC because we also do summons. One Stop KI. Yeah. So, I mean, we're working with a lot. There is opportunities to increase and improve the interactions between these agencies. Doris, we hope that will improve our interaction with finance when people are starting to create their businesses. I'll take any questions.
Let me ask you the same question. I think Secretary of State, we've been paper-driven in the past, and I know you have a lot of interface with the county clerks and other people. Do you see this going to electronic interactions with other people, or are you going to remain paper-driven? What's your push?
I would love to see us paper-driven. Electronic-driven. Apologize to everybody in the room for saying that. I would love to see us become electronic-driven, but as long as people are going to pay with checks, which we see a lot of payment with checks with opening businesses and et cetera, we have to have some paper capability.
Okay. That's people still, do you take cash, right?
We still take cash.
Some people still pay by cash, but that's perhaps the exception instead of the rule. We talked one thing, and this is sort of tangential with I've talked to the sos.ky.gov. You know, I think that it's controlled by COT. They control the .gov. There's an initiative that I would like to see or discuss with the committee at some point, which Ohio has, an ohio.gov that really for security for their citizens says, do not give any personal information or any money to any site that doesn't have a oh.gov, or in our case, a ky.gov site. And they have consistent naming for their state agencies, their cities and counties. And I think whereas COT controls that, what's your understanding with that you have sos.ky.gov is our site, and that's the only one you use?
That is correct.
Right. And the issue on the State Board of Elections, when we're doing remote ballots, that's their issue. And I had an issue with a family member of mine who is military that had to go to a .com site and actually enter who he was voting for in order to get his absentee ballot submitted in time, because if I'd lost by one vote, it was going to be a big problem. Yep. Right. So that's not you.
Correct.
Okay. Very good. Anybody? KI, Kentucky Interactive. So how much of your work is done with KI, or now Tyler Technologies, that is paid for based upon a sort of, they do the work up front and then they get the fees on the back end on that, or how much do they do?
I know that we get billing from them for probably about $30,000 a month. Does that sound about right? Give or take. I'm not exactly how this contract works with Tyler Technologies or KI, because it's one that nobody's seen in several years. So I don't know the amount that they're taking out of the payments made to the Commonwealth, but it's part of the necessary evil, because in order for me to have a software developer, for me to create that inside the office, that's a whole nother position that I'm going to have. So it kind of has our hands tied right now.
Right. Yeah, I think that's sort of the Kentucky Interactive, Tyler Technology. I think that's a subject I'd like to bring at another committee meeting on this, because there's a lot that we could dive into that. So thank you very much for your
Thank
time.
you.
If there's no other questions.
I promise I'll always try to be short and sweet.
Okay. Well, I might get in trouble. I might make a comment. I know. Kentucky Department of Education. Commissioner Couch, I appreciate that.
Yes.
Your time, and please introduce yourself
Sure.
to the committee.
Sure, I'm David Couch, but I grew up in Johnson County, where I'm mainly known as Mrs. Couch's son. A beloved teacher there for a long time that gave kids a good run and go. Is now, okay. So did y'all hear that? I'll go through that again. Okay, so I believe I'm the first recipient, or one of the first, of a computer science course taught in Kentucky. My teacher, Mr. Ramey, insisted, it was a great math teacher, to transition and offer that, which is a Fortran course, which of course changed the course of my life. I attended the United States Military Academy at West Point, studied engineering there, and then the Army sent me to advanced training in certifications in computer science, and was the director of the Tactical Software Division, which was at the time the most advanced electronic warfare facility in the United States that we used very successfully in Operation Desert Storm. In 1992, the Kentucky Education Technology System, KETS, was born, and my mom convinced me to return to Kentucky to be part of that initiative, which I've done for the past 32 years. So obviously the longest person serving in that role in Kentucky history, and probably the national history as well for my equivalent in other states, which has been a wonderful thing. But so I've seen a thing or two, so I know a thing or two, at least about education technology, and very aware of what other states are doing in that arena. One of the things that we do well, and the edge that we have in the other 49 states, is we competitively bid everything going after the very top vendors in the industry, just not to build it, but to maintain it. We maintain very little. We're mainly take the role of a broker of service versus a builder of systems. And to give you an example, in 1995, Kentucky became the first state to have internet to every district. We did that in just 10 months. We did that by partnering with their existing vendors that were out there and connecting every school district in Kentucky and getting that service in place. We build virtually zero software, and that's been very intentional. And by the way, we've been off mainframes since the mid-1990s, so there's no mainframe operations that we have. And we build very little, close to very little software development over the past 15 years. And so we go off the shelf for our school information system, for our financial management system, for our teacher certification system as well. And for the most part, we're the pioneer and national leader in nearly every aspect of education technology. Not saying we're the best, but for the most part, we're the very first to do it and very first to do it to very large scale. We do product standards across every district in Kentucky. Once again, that makes us a national leader in that category. What that does, it allows effectiveness. It allows us to drive down costs significantly for school districts who would normally pay 50 to 60% more for those services. They're able to service it with smaller technology staff since we don't have 50 different financial management systems like the state of Texas does, where we can connect multiple systems together much faster. And from a cybersecurity aspect, we are much more cyber secure. And that proved out well in the recent cyber attacks that we have. We get about 76 billion attempted attacks on Kentucky K-12. Education, by the way, is a top target of cyber criminals. And not to encourage them, but we do fairly well in that arena. And a lot of it has to do with the product standards that we've put in place. A lot of what we do is we shift or share the risk with our vendor partners. We go after the very best in the industry versus doing it all ourselves. And we're the national leader in cloud-based computing, not just in K-12, but in government, and I would also say the private sector. For the most part, we were the first to do it and the first to do it to a large scale. For example, back in the early 2000s or 2012 timeframe, we became the first organization to do cloud-based email across an entire organization. And keep in mind, K-12 is 25 times bigger than the rest of the state government and all local governments combined in the size and scale of what we do. So that was a major implementation to do across an organization, which we were followed by other industries in putting that in place. And by the way, I do want to mention that during that time frame with the current COT staff and prior, is they never held us back. We were doing cloud-based, and they could have, and some of my folks of other states have been held back in doing things, and they were very understanding that we were pressing forward and doing something that had never been done, and they supported that. And we've had great success with it. When we had the success with the email system, we became the largest financial management cloud-based system in the United States. And this is all government types of organizations because we had success with that. And we've continued that on with the implementations that we put in place. And really, I think part of it, too, is we've held our vendor partners accountable to share that risk with us, and also with the success that we put in place. The other thing that I think is a key part of our success compared to the other 49 states is I would say KD has the best relationship with its district's education technology staff by far. Now, a lot of that has to do with I've been around 32 years. A lot of my staff has been around 32 years and put up with me for that long. So we've had some A players for a long time that could have done many other things, but wanted to be part of this special thing that we put together and had success with. So the relationships happen. We have field staff that work directly with districts on a daily basis. We have a summit every year that we have a high percentage of our district CIOs attend. We have a monthly get-together. We're the only state in the United States that's been doing that for quite some time, to listen to them, just not to say here's what's going on, but to get the feedback. And every year, at the end of the year, we ask them what are the top 5 things we did well, didn't do well, and our should be goals for the following year. And 100% participation. Now, it's a lot of fun reading the things we did well, but what they understand is we listen to the things we did not do well or should have done sooner and take action upon that to get that good relationship that we've had in place. You were talking about telecommuting. Once again, going back in time, back in the late 90s, I was made the chairman of the Kentucky Communications Advisory Council for 1 year. I get that tour, and I picked one topic, and it was telecommuting, to create a Kentucky state government telecommuting guide. Now, it took me 22 years to be correct in that vision, but we have, when the pandemic came, but we'd actually been implementing that since that time frame. And actually, that document that we created back in 1998 was very relevant in 2020 and beyond. And for the most part, our technology staff has been walking that talk since the late 90s as far as telecommuting and putting that in place. When we moved from Fountain Place to the Sauer Building, we volunteered to take much less space than everybody else because a lot of our staff is out working with districts or can do their work remotely and just as effectively in that capacity. Obviously, we get together face to face when we do that. But like people have mentioned before, we could not have recruited the talent and kept them had we not taken that approach. And states like Indiana and Georgia have done the same thing model of us. They virtually have everyone that's virtual. The states that went hardcore and tried to bring everybody back in person are having struggles filling positions because people are not coming back, especially in the technology field that we have in place. The words of wisdom, I'd also say for us, if it can be done in the cloud off the shelf, that is our much preferred option. In fact, we take a look at things when people want to build something and we say, why do you want to build it? Do we not have something already that can do it? For example, our school information system has a lot of latitude. And so we've had some things come up in the department where they want to build it and we go, no, we can do it this way without building. Because when you build it, you got to maintain it. And 80% of your costs are after you build it or buy anything. So you got to look at the total cost of ownership of what you put in place. And an example of that is when the Professional Standards Board became part of the Department of Education again, and they did what they did. I'm not to be too critical on it, but they had 100 different homegrown applications. And they had virtually tiny staff to maintain that, which to me was a huge operational and security risk. And so we immediately did a bid for that service, for a white glove service, just not to build it, but to maintain it. And my words of wisdom to folks, if someone does this, and I keep on hearing, well, we're the only ones that do that, so we have to have a homegrown, unique thing. And I would say that, but you don't. If you take a look at the financial management system, school information system, is every state does that a little differently, but you now have statewide systems that can do that can be tweaked with the standards that we have. And teacher certification is a good example of that. Probably 5 or 10 years ago, the reason they had to develop so much, there wasn't vendors out there. Now there's 3. And I would say the big systems that you have, I encourage vendors all the time, if there's something every state has, get in that business of trying to provide it, just like teacher certification put in place. My last words of wisdom is something that we've pressed for quite some time is for our organization to be on a healthy data diet. And that means annually taking a look at the data you're collecting from districts and really seeing whether you really need that or not. And that also reduces the number of applications that you have to have. But you have to have those honest discussions. And so, for example, in the early 2000s, we eliminated 90% of the data we collected from school districts. 90%. Now, I'm not saying what they collected before wasn't there, but people had come and gone, and the reason for collecting it was no longer necessary. So I always encourage folks to go through that process and really challenge yourself to really see whether you got to have it. And by the way, is there law and legislation behind it? Because if you don't have that piece, your quality of your data is not going to be very good. So that's a broad overview, and I'll leave some time for questions or comments that you may have.
Chairman Pratt.
Question, last month in one of my committees, one of the groups that came and presented was talking about AI to the school system. Is that within your wheelhouse, or is that done school system by school system? Just curious about that.
Well, to take it back in time, and when I was an Army officer at that facility, 2 things I was in charge of was unmanned aerial vehicles called drones, and at that time, artificial intelligence. And I was in fact impacted by Johnny Quest and the Jetsons early, and you see a lot of that technology come to fruition, and I was always interested, when would the AI start happening more publicly, which is starting to happen. Obviously, I'll take a look at it from an Army officer point of view and educational point of view. I think in education and medicine, it has a great potential for growth. And we talked to districts about the plus and minus of this. And my mom's a former English teacher, and I asked her what she thought about AI, given it could help you write, right? And obviously, with AI, it hallucinates, by the way. So if it doesn't know something, it'll kind of make parts of it up and give references that aren't real. So you got to check the stuff, even if you ask it to write it for you. But it will play a role in school systems. I think it could be a great aid to teachers in developing lesson plans, for example, definitely in medicine. Obviously, on a bigger context, I think it needs some boundaries around it. I worry about the concerns of it being developed so fast at the pace it's being developed. But definitely, we've seen even one of our former teachers of the year just wrote a book on the 50 ways to use AI and instruction is one of the top sellers in the United States. And so it is going to be a player. AI will be part of people's lives going forward if you take a look at the next 10 or 15 or 20 years. So we definitely want our students to be aware of that and teachers as well as we go forward in the future.
Thanks, sir.
Representative Hutchins?
Yes, question regarding internet connectivity of all the school districts. You guys are not using Kentucky Wired, is that right? You
No.
use some other commercial service?
So we bid that every 10 years, and the current provider is through the Kentucky Information Highway, and the prime is AT&T, and it's those smaller those small telcos throughout Kentucky.
Okay, and it's still E-rate money that pays for that connectivity as opposed to anything in your budget briefing here?
Well, we pay that money up front. We get the rebates back, and then we send the money to districts, which they match equally. So it's a 4-to-1, 3-to-1 to 4-to-1 bang for the buck. So the state, we pay that as a state shared service for all 171 school districts. We get that money back from the federal folks, and then we send that money to districts, which they match equally, which they're eligible for E-rate as well. So it's one of the best investments our states make.
Okay, so there's nothing in your budget briefing that we got in advance that would address internet connectivity costs?
I can give that to you what we're paying, annually for it. It's around 13 million.
13 million. Okay,
Yeah,
all right. Thank you.
for all districts. Yeah.
So you probably have, it's interesting, the districts, the however many hundreds of districts you interface with, do they do their own, I know you provide a lot of services, do they have other services, other data collection that they collect on their own, not for you? Do you look at some of the applications, or are they pretty much outside of the services you provide? They're on their own, they can procure student PCs or laptops or these Google
They
things?
can do
they're
those.
doing?
Obviously, there's latitude, there's guidelines, but there's some standardization of the big data systems, because we got to have, for example, a teacher going from one district to another one, we want that to be standardized, so they have to be trained and the data interacts immediately with it. There's smaller ones, obviously, they can make Excel spreadsheets for smaller ones, and I'm sure they do. But the really big ones, the authoritative data sources, we do have state standards across the state for that. And, nothing's 100% perfect, but I would say there's great support for having those in place by the districts.
Okay, so the districts really look for you to set standards for
Yeah.
them
Yes.
locally.
They do.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? I think that we are within 5 minutes of leaving. It's been a good time. I appreciate you all coming to this meeting. Chairman Pratt, I'm looking forward to the next meeting when you're chairing. Do you have any final words you'd like to say?
No, again, this is just tip of the iceberg, guys. We got a long way to go. We got to look at, again, a roadmap, where we're going, how we're going to get there. How do we do it efficiently? I'll come back to that again. And so I think we got a lot of information. The good news is that's why we set the date out so far to actually start implementing this, because we want to do it correctly. So thank you guys for all your information today, and we'll probably be back again.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Second. Moved.